Hello everyone, it's great to have the sixth session of our cognitive neuroscience course. Today we are going to talk about language and thoughts, and how language and thoughts are related to what we call problem solving, and how they are related to each other. We are going to cover different topics here today, but before starting to discuss about different topics, Parnyan, are you online to just give us a really rapid overview about the disclosures that we have inside the class?
Kind of understand that language is what we call Homo sapiens. So we know that when we go for other groups of other species in the among Homo kind of different kind of groups of kind of under the primates, different species that we have, we know that sapiens is the only species that has language. So we our current understanding is other basically. Let me just change this. Okay, other groups in Homo kind of category like Homo demanisi. I will talk about this specific group later, and Homo erectus or other groups. They do not, probably they didn't have language as we do as Homo sapiens. And then when you talk about what is the exact meaning of sapiens in what is the exact meaning? Check the different dictionaries or different resources, online resources. They say it means wise. In Arabic language, sapiens to some extent is what they call natiq. And natiq means somebody who is able to have what they call nutq. And nutq means being able to talk. So in even when you go to something like kind of mainly kind of Arabic, Persian, Islamic teachings, you when they talk about humans as something of trying to describe humans, they call them the kind of haywanun natiq. It means that the animal who is able to talk, and being able to talk is not just about the kind of the simple production of words. It's also about being able to process information using the words. And it is really close to what the concept that we are talking in terms of being wise. But meanwhile, being able to be natiq or being able to wise is also associated with another interesting concept, which we call deception.
Thank you, Parnyan. Thank you very much for just giving us an idea about the course disclosure. And as Parnyan has mentioned, the main reason that we are asking about doing the homework every session and doing the exam is just providing you with a framework that is going to help you to actively engage in the process of learning the technical details that we have during the course. And it is not a course for basically for public audience. It is an academic course with details and sophistications that sometimes could even get to some level boring. So it is not designed to be entertaining at its kind of highest level. So we try to make it as scientific and as academic as possible, to give you even the complexities that we are facing. So that is the main kind of essence behind the course. So we are not trying to make it a very entertaining course. It is just going to be very informative and comprehensive, and covers the major topics that you need to learn about cognitive neuroscience to have a good idea about what are the things that are happening there. And sometimes there are people who are excited about brain, but they just are excited about some not very scientific aspects of brain sciences. But when we get to the details, it just people feel that it is too much complex. So that is the kind of the process, and we hope that those who are interested to this level of complexity and a deep understanding about what are the things happening inside the brain would be welcome to join us and continue with us in the process of course. Okay, so let's go for the topics that we are going to cover today. We are going to cover 6 major topics, and I hope that they are going to be helpful and informative. First of all, we are going to discuss about language, thoughts, and problem solving, and talk about how these issues are technically interrelated to each other. You can start to think about your problem solving process, and when you start to think about different topics, could you think about something without using your language? So thinking about a problem or thinking about a solution for a problem without using your language. Is this possible for you or not? You can start to think about a specific problem that you have been facing recently, or a specific, let's say, thought that you have been engaged before or recently, and then think about, okay, is this possible that I can follow that thought process without using my language? Is this something technically doable or not? Yeah, I have feedbacks here. Zahra is saying no. Elham is saying no. So you think that you cannot start to solve a problem without using your language. And so that's an interesting process in terms of how language, thought, and problem solving are interrelated to each other. Are they overlapping to a great extent, or they are basically the same processes? Or there are areas of problem solving that are not language bounded? Or basically whatever we are doing in our thought process is language bounded? Or basically language is the tool for us to be able to think. And then we can start to think about, okay, can we have different thought processes using different languages? Could people with different languages have different thought processes because they are using different tools for processing information? So these are technical questions that are really and critically important about how we understand kind of the cognitive processes that are happening inside the brain. So I'm going to get to some of the kind of technical details about these major questions today, and kind of help you to have a better understanding about these processes. Meanwhile, it should also be important for you to kind of understand that language is technically one of the specific features of what we call Homo sapiens. So we know that when we go for other groups of other species among Homo, different kind of groups of kind of under the primates, different species that we have, we know that sapiens is the only species that has language. So our current understanding is other groups in Homo kind of category, like Homo demanisi. I will talk about this specific group later, and Homo erectus, or other groups. They didn't have language as we do as Homo sapiens. And then when you talk about what is the exact meaning of sapiens, what is the exact meaning of sapiens? If you check the different dictionaries or different resources, online resources, they say it means wise. In Arabic language, sapiens to some extent is what they call natiq. And natiq means somebody who is able to have what they call nutq. And nutq means being able to talk. So even when you go to something like kind of mainly kind of Arabic, Persian, Islamic teachings, when they talk about humans as something of trying to describe humans, they call them the kind of haywanun natiq. It means that the animal who is able to talk. And being able to talk is not just about the kind of the simple production of words. It's also about being able to process information using the words. And it is really close to what the concept that we are talking in terms of being wise. But meanwhile, being able to be natiq or being able to wise is also associated with another interesting concept which we call deception. And by deception, I mean people are able to make tricks. People are able to show something that is not real. So we are able to show that we are happy with talking about that, okay, we are happy or we are this or that, but we are not really what we are explaining about or what we are describing about ourselves. And that is, there are people who believe that that is the source of what we call deception. So they think that those species that are able to use language, then they would be able to have deception. And it seems that Homo sapiens as a species was able to extinct other species in the same category. So we basically extinct other species because of being able to deceive, or because of being able to solve complex problems and technically extinct others. And even it's quite interesting that compared to Homo erectus, Homo sapiens has less kind of muscular body. So technically, as even you can see in this figure, Homo sapiens is kind of least kind of muscular member of this specific category. And this name is coming from a part of Georgia that they found in. Georgia is basically north Iran, east to Turkey, so you can find that part of the basically Eurasia. And they found this specific kind of group of Homo, and it's quite interesting that they have even this group is far more muscular compared to the Homo sapiens. And it's amazing that how Homo sapiens was able to extinct others, not only these groups, but also many other kind of animal creatures like what we call mammoths or several other kind of groups of animals that are being extinct by Homo sapiens, probably because Homo sapiens is able to deceive. And when we talk about deception and language, and probably a word with better connotation compared to deception, what we call problem solving. So probably sometimes we like to say that, okay, we are problem solvers, not deceivers, but problem solving. So it seems that these concepts are interrelated to each other to a great extent, even in terms of the evolution. And there are people who believe that when we have deception, then we can have free will. Because free will would be meaningful when you are able to deceive, because you are able to show things that are not real. So you can just differentiate between doing A or B and be able to kind of select between different options to do, whether it's going to be right or wrong. So there are people from the kind of some specific areas of psychology that they think that they are highly related to each other. So when we talk about deception, about language, they are related to free will, and that is the kind of the initial steps in terms of understanding how language could be important, and then how these concepts could be related to what we call consciousness, and how they could be related to what we call control, and then how we can use language to even be able to control things that are not only outside but also inside us. And then talking about how language would be related to what we call emotion regulation. So it seems that these concepts are highly related. So it seems that the language, having things in the language, would be related to having them in the consciousness, And then when we have things in the consciousness, we have a level of conscious control over them. And then these concepts are related to what we call emotion regulation. So these concepts are highly related to each other and are really important to have a good understanding about these concepts. Even when we talk about different psychiatric disorders, even there are several kind of psychotherapy packages that are designed to change the language in a way that we would be able to regulate our emotions. So they believe that if you are depressed or if you are anxious, if you change the way that your language is processing information, you would be able to overcome your anxiety or your depression. So these concepts are highly related to each other. It's critically important to have a good understanding about them if you want to use them in the clinical world. I'm just going to add a few other kind of aspects to these basic kind of understanding about language and thought, giving you more personal experiences about that. I've told you before that I love with running, and I run kind of long distances, and kind of almost in the same time last year in September, I was a keynote speaker in one of their national psychiatric congresses in New Zealand, in a town. It was in the name of Nelson, to some extent south of New Zealand. And as you can see here, I was running for something like 13 miles. It is for those who kind of use kilometers, something like 22 kilometers. So it is a half marathon. And I mean, that's a pretty much reasonable pace. 9 minutes 43 seconds. It means that you do every 1 mile, or something like every 1.67 kilometer in 9:43 seconds. And the lower this one, the better it would be. So that is the way that you kind of usually measure that. But this is the kind of the routine that I do frequently in different places. And as you can see here in Nelson, you can start to run from the beach areas, and then you can go up to the mountains, and then you need to be back from mountains back to the beaches. And it's a really, really nice and beautiful place to visit. And then as you can see here, I run in different places. This one is in Mashhad in Iran. I'm not sure how many people we already have here from Mashhad. Do we have anybody from Mashhad here? Those who are from Mashhad, they know that's something like from Hashemiya Street to the Mellat Park. And I've tried also kind of from Hashemiya to the Imam Reza Hali Shrine. There's something like, I think, 7-8 miles. So I do that in different places. And also this one is in New York City, around the Central Park. Those who are from New York City, they know it's something like kind of 6 miles around that. Which is not really kind of a long distance, but it's a really beautiful route. And then this one from Tulsa, the place that I live. When I'm closer to the kind of marathon runs, I usually run longer distances, something like 15, 16 miles, a few weeks before marathon to just get ready for marathons. And this one is in Vancouver, and I know that there are people here from Vancouver around the Stanley Park. And it was something like, I think I started the kind of the run for something in the 20 degrees of Fahrenheit, which is something like the around or below zero degree in centigrade, and it was at the end it was something like 35 degrees in Fahrenheit, which is still really, really chilly, but it was a really nice experience. So that is something that I do frequently. And besides all the kind of interesting aspects of physical activities, it's an interesting experience that I usually solve major problems that I have in my life during the process of running. And that's quite an interesting experience, being able to solve problems when you are running. And I think that is really related to what we are going to discuss today about, in terms of how running could be something that could be helpful in the process of problem solving. And I think there are important insights to that. First of all, when I run in silence. So I do not use any basically music or podcast. And I'm a great fan of podcasts, so I kind of listen to many different podcasts, but I do not listen to ebooks or podcasts or any sort of music, even in long distances, something like 2 hours, 3 hours of run. And then I usually kind of do what I call preloading with impasses or problems. And impasses means kind of dead-end questions, some of the problems that you cannot solve. So I usually kind of start to think about those problems that I need to solve, whether they are kind of relational problems, so I have a kind of a problem with others, or I have a specific, let's say, question for my research that I need to answer. I usually preload myself with these problems. And I try to make what I call a mental representational space for those problems. So I start to expand those problems in my mind from different aspects. Try to explain the problem as much as I can in my mind and extend that as what I call representational space. I try to make a representational space from the problem even before starting to run. And then I realized that it's also really important in terms of the pace. So if I run in really fast paces, I cannot solve problems. I need to give enough blood to my brain to be able to do it. So I need to run in paces something like 9:30 to be able to solve problems. If I go for something like 8, 7:30, those kind of fast paces, I cannot solve problems there. Or even if I go for some kind of really slow paces, sometimes I'm not a really good kind of problem solver, even on those paces. So it has a specific range of pace that is working for me in a way that is going to help, that helps me to be able to solve problems. And then what I do usually, I listen to body. When I run, I usually listen to what is happening in my body in a kind of way that I usually call it introspection and introception. And introspection, it means that I'm listening to what is happening inside the body, and I'm seeing what is happening inside the body. And introception, it means I'm perceiving what is happening in my body. So I pay attention to, so I try to be self-reflecting as much as I can and do some self-referential processing while I'm running and in the process of running. And then I try to be non-judgmental and in a level of non-judgmental acceptance. And acceptance means I'm observing what is happening. And by non-judgmental, it means that there is no limbic activation associated with that. So that is the explanation that I gave to my kind of friends last week when he was asking about what do you mean by non-judgmental. He's from a kind of yoga side. So we have been discussing with Ashkan. I'm not sure if Ashkan is online today or not. So we have been discussing with Ashkan in terms of kind of what do we mean by non-judgmental from the neuroscience perspective. And I told Ashkan that what I mean by non-judgmental is not to have any emotion associated with that. So not having any significant level of limbic engagement. So it's just basically prefrontal cortex that is observing what is happening without having any bad feeling about that, and even any significant good feeling or being excited about that. Just observing what is happening from the prefrontal activations. And then having two different processes that are to some extent interrelated to each other, and then one is what I call inner talk and then mental imagery. If you remember when I discussed about working memory, for working memory we had two main lines. One line was visual spatial sketchpad and the other was verbal rehearsal. So with the working memory we have one, let's say, visual and one verbal side to working memory. And even I discussed about what we had as iconic or echoic memory in terms of very short memories that we discussed last session. So those concepts also highly related to each other. But I mean, they are discussing about two, to some extent, separate modalities that starts from simple sensory modalities, from vision and hearing, but vision and hearing would go even to the level of thought processes. So we can have thought processes that are visual and not verbal. And then we can have mental imagery involved in that process. So that is the combination of these two lines. And then how these things would be related to each other in what we call a conceptual level, which is multimodal. So we have both sensory, both visual and auditory modalities combined to each other. So it is multimodal parts. There are multimodal parts of the brain involved in that process that we discussed about those concepts last session. And it's also quite interesting to know that when we talk about introspection or even interoception, it's also important to realize that you can being caught into those kind of self-referential processings. And that could get problematic as well. So when we talk about these cognitive processes, it's really important for you to understand that we have a spectrum. And within the spectrum, there are parts that are healthy. There are parts that are what they call supernormal. So they are helpful to make supernormal kind of powers for you to be able to control yourself. But they could also get pathologic, or they could get into a abnormal way that could make another level of mental health disorders. So being caught into introspection could be problematic and abnormal in some direction. So those who are being caught to that in a way that they cannot come out of that, and they have significant what we call rumination processes that are happening there, and not just introspection, it's also introspection in combination of limbic activations. So they do not have non-judgmental process. They just get involved in the judgmental process, and they are involved in that introspection in a way that is not healthy. So it's also important for you to learn how these things are needed to be balanced to each other to make the supernormal functioning for you. And it's really interesting that when I kind of solve a problem, it's just something like an aha moment. I just feel like I found the answer. And it's amazing that I'm spending most of the time on the problem, not on the solution. So I just try to, as I discussed through these items till now, as I was explaining, I'm mainly focused on the problem, not what is the solution. And the solution comes to mind something like, eureka, I found it. I just got the point. And I usually need to record those solutions, because sometimes I just solve 3, 4, 5 problems, and I have 3, 4, 5 new ideas and innovations. I usually kind of record them on my phone, even while I'm running, because most of the time when I'm back home, I'm exhausted, and sometimes I realize that I totally forget things that I basically discovered during the running process. And there are problems that I need to have. I mean, it seems that 1 hour running is not enough for me to be able to solve them. And I usually use what I call problem incubation, or longer problem incubation. And I usually solve them during sleep. So I do very similar processes that I told you today for the sleep, in a way that I can solve problems while I'm asleep. And it works well. I can tell you it works really well. So I will kind of discuss about some of those aspects in the next steps. And meanwhile, as a last point, I need to say that there are questions that you need to realize that they are not really good raw material for this pipeline that I explained for you today. For example, whether should I go to this travel or not, or what is the best activity to do for this, let's say, holiday, or what is the best kind of place to travel for this weekend. So there are questions that are not critical, and they need huge amount of energy, and the final result is not very much they're very much important for your life, in terms of whether you go to the north or south, or you go do A or B for your holiday or for your weekend. And I usually try to avoid those unnecessary questions, because I realize that this pipeline is expending a lot of energy and resources, and I do not put questions inside this pipeline that are not really important questions. So I try not to engage this system in the questions that are not really critical in my life. Okay, so that was the first part. to discuss about some problem solving, and then we will start from this kind of basic concepts moving forward to the next part that we are going to talk about the neuroscience of how these things are happening.